life isn't linear and things don't wait for perfect timing. You're deep in your hermit phase, thinking, reflecting, finding clarity, and then out of nowhere, the wheel starts to turn and change comes knocking, whether you're ready for it or not. And what happens next isn't about avoiding it. It's about deciding how to meet it. It's not about resisting that spin. It's about learning to turn with the wheel.
Your journey to the divine is an intimate exploration of self, where you are both the seeker and the source of enlightenment. I, Jessica Paschke, invite you to break free from the ordinary, to reforge your spiritual path with courage, curiosity, and audacity. Unleash the power of your spiritual connection, stepping into a purpose-driven life free of have-tos and shoulds. Join me on this profound exploration of rediscovery, where you'll not only redefine your own spiritual practice, but also inspire a collective awakening. Welcome to Reclaiming Our Spirit.
Welcome back to Reclaiming Our Spirit. Thanks so much for being here. Cannot wait to dive in and expand not so much more on the hermit, but really what happens after the hermit. But before we do, moment of joy involves a tiny dog in a colorful sweater in a stroller. So every day, I sit in my office and I can peer out my window, and every single day, the most adorable little old white dog in a variety of sweaters. I mean, this dog has more sweaters than I do, all the colors of the rainbow, gets walked in a stroller all the way down the street to the beach. They set this little cute dog on the beach, let him walk around, put him back in the stroller, and take him all the way back home. And it is the most adorable thing I've ever seen, but also like just a heart opener to watch these people who love this dog so much take care of it in this stage of the game where it's not able to walk, but they still want to bring joy into its life. There's something about seeing that act of love that I think opens you up to be more receptive of love in your own life. And so every day I am reminded that out there, the world is a really good place because there is someone dressing their dog in a sweater, wrapping him up in a blanket, and walking him down to the beach in a stroller so that he can have his joy for the day. And I love that. So that is my moment of joy. Last episode, we chatted about the hermit, 2025's card of the year, and how it really invited us to step back from all the noise and like tune into that inner wisdom, finding clarity through all the big questions like, who am I? What matters? Why are we here? All those really big questions. And how it's a journey of self-awareness and introspection that you take step by step. And like your soul is the light that leads the way. And what happens after all that hermiting? That's the focus of this episode. But before we do that, for those of you who don't know or are just tuning in, I have been teaching intuitive development for over a decade, working as a transformation coach. And my work lives in this really sweet spot of where spirituality and self-development and leadership all overlap. Because who we are, what we believe, and how we show up in the world, they're all really deeply connected. So basically, if you wanted to sum it up into one sentence, change is my thing. I am fascinated by change, how it happens, where it comes from, how we work with it, the inevitability of it. And this comes into play today because the hermit's clarity, going off on that journey, going within, often leads to everyone's most favorite thing, change. And I know we all aren't super excited about change all the time, especially when it's not something we've chosen to have happen. But when we hermit, I would hate to leave you hanging this year without giving you the support you need and realizing that with the hermiting, you are going to have change. You're going to have change. And because it is a collective energy, because it is a collective happening, you are going to have change whether you want to or not. So let's just look at the wheel in depth first. Visually, it's a really cool card. Usually on typical like traditional decks, at the center of it is there's this large wheel and it's divided into 8 different sections. And it kind of resembles like a compass or even a zodiac, depending on what the symbols are. But it's really emphasizing this idea of cycles and divine order. And it sits in the center of the sky, typically, with clouds all around it. So the wheel is just symbolizing this idea like things are ever turning. And sometimes It's traditionally called the Wheel of Fortune. I just call it the wheel. I don't know. Of fortune, I don't know. It just doesn't jive with me sometimes. So I call it the wheel, but the official name is the Wheel of Fortune. So sometimes there are different symbols, different astrological signs on there that tell us, gives us a little bit of insight about what's happening with the wheel, just symbolically. But the thing is with the wheel and what the imagery of the wheel in most cards is trying to convey is this idea that life happens in cycles, that there is divine timing, that we need adaptability, and that change is going to happen. And we need to be clear about our perspective around it. Okay, so upright, this means we're talking about positive change, breakthroughs, divine timing, acceptance. Reversed can mean resistance to change, not being in alignment, delays in change. Okay, so it's this idea of movement and the movement that comes from the wheel turning, that comes from like all the different ways we mark cycles in our life. So sometimes it's, seasons, sometimes it's age, sometimes it's like phases, like weeks, days, months, whatever it is talking about this idea of the wheel moving and things changing. The interesting thing is that change actually starts in the hermit's journey. That's why I said I cannot leave you hanging, because the change isn't like we do the hermit and then we do the wheel. So with all of that contemplation and that going within, we start to look at our internal landscape. And each glance into our internal landscape, we start to kick up a little dust. We agitate a few things that we didn't know were there. And so you're bound to bump up against some things when you're doing the hermit thing. No one goes on an inner journey and is like, I'm good, nothing to see here. We all find something. And so reflecting on what's not working and imagining what could be different is the hermit's thing. And now we need to figure out, like, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Where are we going from here? With that reflection, and you do have to reflect, the wheel begins to turn. The wheel begins to turn. It's the natural next step. It's the turning point, if you will. So it turns, and with this turning, everything around us shifts. Now, sometimes they're big shifts. Sometimes they're little shifts. Okay. It's not saying like everything's going to be turned upside down. It's just when you're bringing that internal and external landscape into alignment, you're going to have to move through the world in different ways, and you're going to have to change what you were doing. And the wheel says you can try to ignore it, but it's not going to work out well for you because the wheel is going to be moving no matter what. Now, you may be wondering, Jessica, why are you bringing up the wheel? I just started to hermit. I have 12 months to hermit before I wheel. Yes, and we know that life isn't linear. And we know that things don't happen one at a time. So it's not hermit 1, 2, 3, and now wheel. Things are happening at the same time. So you're going to kick some things up, and then change is going to be required. You're going to kick some things up, change is going to be required, which is one of the reasons why change can be so challenging. It's not happening in like this void. The world does not stop while we attempt to adjust. While you are living your very best hermit life, the wheel is there moving underneath this constant motion. It's that response to that agitation. And that's what's so much a pain in the ass part of the wheel, is that even when you want it to stop turning, even when you want to tap out, even when you want to get off, the wheel keeps moving. And the key is how to work with it. How do we work with the inevitable momentum that we get from the hermit rather than resist? So there's a few things that we can keep in mind while you hermit and wheel at the same time. So like I just mentioned, change isn't linear. So if change isn't linear, the wheel is like a wheel. It's not a straight line. Sometimes you're going to go forward. Sometimes you're going to go backwards a little bit. And the idea here is that even if you go back a few steps, even if you relapse a little bit with your change, it's fine, because the momentum of the wheel is going to eventually carry you forward. You're still moving forward. You're just learning more about yourself. So you move forward, a couple steps back, you hermit, you reflect, takes you forward again. Okay. Do you see how they're working together? They're working together. You're going to need a practice of intentionality. So we can do more with the change that's happening, and we can feel like more opens up for us rather than like if we just focus on the loss of it or like just the change itself, if we get intentional about things. So While we're listening to the hermit, while we're doing all our self-awareness and reflection work, that's not optional. Mindfulness is huge. How do I want to be intentional with everything that's happening this year across the board? Even if you're like, hermit, I'm not paying attention to it. I'm not paying attention to it. Anytime we're in uncertain times, we have to be really intentional because it's not solid under our feet. Things are ever evolving, ever changing under our feet. So being mindful of how you're moving through the world is huge, is huge during uncertain times. Things to pay attention to, thinking, your thoughts, like what are you thinking? Do you want to be thinking that? Is that what you want? Taking up space in your brain? Are you expressing yourself clearly? And not only like to those around you, but to yourself. Are you really clearly communicating with yourself? You want to leave room for inspiration. Give yourself room. Give yourself space to dream, to think big, to imagine what could be. You want to be really aware of and have a practice of intentionality around your feelings and your emotions. So, what emotions are coming up? And then getting really curious as to why. What are they trying to tell you? All the time in my classes, I say emotions are intuitive messages. They're not just happening, they're trying to tell you something. So, what are they trying to tell you? What is going on? We want to drop from head thinking and into heart thinking. Now, you do need both. I'm not saying you're going to ignore your logic and default to your heart space. That is nonsense. We need both when the wheel is turning. But you don't want to get stuck in analysis paralysis. So part of that is like, I become aware of my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. And then drop into that heart space. It's an and. Drop into that heart space, balance those two things out. So those thoughts and feelings, thoughts and emotions are really are tied. They're intentionally tied. I'm intentionally taking my thoughts and dropping into that heart space. What emotions are happening? What happens when I look at it like thoughts plus emotions? Practice of intentionality. And also purpose comes into it. So when you're in a great deal of change, especially if you're in a phase of like introspection that leads into change, choosing your purpose and then choosing to pay attention to the purpose that you've chosen is huge. Purpose doesn't just happen. It doesn't just show up, just doesn't land, doesn't arrive in a box. It's something that you choose. But when you have it, it makes navigating change so much easier and it makes navigating the unknown so much easier. Okay, so this practice of intentionality around our thoughts, around our feelings, around our purpose. And then we were just talking about this next one in the Spiritual Evolution Collective, and I wanted to include it. Authentic self. Someone's word was authentic, and we had a great conversation around it. So the hermit asks, who am I? And then the wheel's response to who am I is to help you make that answer happen. So we can ask ourselves all day long, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? But what we're really asking is, who's my authentic self? What does authentic mean? What does that look like? What is my truth? Truth with a big T versus the little t. Like, what is my truth at the core of who I am? And am I expressing? Am I making decisions from this authentic place, choices from this authentic place, or am I not? And that's another thing that's going to help with change. It's easier to make a decision around change and which direction you want to go when you're tuned into your authentic self. And then, of course, I mentioned this briefly, having that internal and external collaboration. You can't go on an internal journey and not intentionally like have that be reflected in your external because the agitation will be too great. Our greatest amount of success in whatever it is that we do comes from when our internal lines up with what we're choosing externally. So we take all of that hermit and we bring it into real life with the wheel. We use that momentum of the wheel to bring it into real life and being really intentional about that change and then staying open to what's possible. And then the last thing, grace. Grace. Change requires grace with ourselves, with others, with the world. I would like to believe that most of us are doing the best we can with what we've got. That's what I would like to believe in the world. I'm going to move forward with that. Okay. That most of us are trying to do the best we can with what we've got. So grace is essential. We're all trying. We're all trying. And so looking at this idea of like, okay, if I'm going through the hermit energy and I'm consciously using the hermit energy this year, and my wheel is a turning and changes are happening, there are people out there that have no idea this energy is happening, no idea what's going on with the astrology, nothing. And they're just doing the best they can with what they have. So grace for yourself, grace for others, grace for the world. The question I kind of want to bring up as we wrap this episode up is, what is one step that you can take to align with the wheel's momentum today? Right? Change is already happening. How are you going to meet it? How are you going to meet it? If this episode sparked something from you, don't let the conversation stop here. Sign up for my newsletter from World to Fool, where we are diving deeper into uncertain time and navigating all of life's transitions, all of the changes. And you'll also be the first to hear about all new offers that are going to be launching this year. So trust me, you don't want to miss that. So you can find the link in the show notes. Make sure you sign up. And until next time, remember, the wheel keeps turning, but how you move with it is up to you. Be intentional about that. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Reclaiming Our Spirit. To find out how I can help you reclaim your spirit, reach out to me at www.jessicapashke.com. Leave me a message and I just may share how you reclaimed your spirit in the next episode.